What do you know about Sonic the Hedgehog? I mean, that's kind of a stupid question, let's be real. I know Sonic, you know Sonic. I think it's a fair statement to say that at least half of the internet knows of this godforsaken franchise. If it isn't through the games themselves, it's probably because of the fandom. Probably one of the weirdest fandoms out there, but hey, every fandom has its weird bits. Regardless of all of that, though, Sonic is definitely an icon of the gaming industry. This series has seen some of the highest highs and the lowest lows, and yet in spite of all of that, I would say the majority of Sonic games are looked upon fondly by the general public. But how did all of this start? What made Sonic the icon he is today? Let's take a trip back to the late 80s, just before 1990. Sega was in the midst of their war on the Super Nintendo with their console, the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive. Sega was making some ground in terms of market share, but it wasn't enough to take down Nintendo's all-encompassing presence, and Nintendo had their flagship series to thank for it. Mario was just the king of gaming back then, with 3 hit games under his belt and more on the way. Now, that's not to say that Sega didn't have a mascot. They did, that being Alex the Kid, but let me ask you a question. I'm being 100% serious. Have you ever played an Alex the Kid game? I haven't. Actually, come to think of it, you could have, because it was that remake a couple years... Regardless of that, though, Alex the Kid stood no chance on taking on Super Mario, so Sega decided it needed to come up with a new mascot. You've heard all of this before, right? So I won't sit here recounting all of this to you, but long story short, Naoto Oshima submitted a drawing of a small hedgehog character named Mr. Needlemouse. Sega execs loved Naoto Oshima's character, and they signed off on it as Sega's new, official mascot. After some retooling, of course, he was recolored blue to match the Sega logo, given red shoes inspired from Santa Claus and Michael Jackson. Yeah. Most importantly, he was given an attitude that would speak to that raw, bad boy 90s edge. Honestly, looking at some of the artwork for Sonic at the time, you can kind of get the sense that he's sitting there just with that attitude, just like, hey kid, why play Mario on that lame NES 8-bit piece of shit? When you could be playing Sonic the Hedgehog on the ultra-powerful 16-bit Sega Genesis. A team of elite programmers was then formed at Sega of Japan, consisting of Naoto Oshima, lead programmer and future convict Yuji Naka, Hirokazu Yasuhara on level design, and several others who then formed Sonic Team. For the game's soundtrack, Sega got in contact with Masato Nakamura of the band Dreams Come True. With everything set and ready, on June 23, 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog hit store shelves. To say that the game was a hit would be an understatement. The game sold incredibly well, selling around 24 million units worldwide and even outperformed Mario for a bit. Hell, Sonic even managed to accomplish the very thing Sega needed him to do in the first place, as the Sega Genesis eventually gained a small market share lead over the Super Nintendo, which eventually proved that you didn't have to be named Nintendo to make it in the games console industry. It is wild to think that Sonic is over 30 years old now. He's far outlived any normal hedgehog, and like I said a bit ago, there have been some really high highs and some really, really low lows, but the franchise is still kicking. That original game is now 33 years old as of this video's making, but does that game still hold up? Well, if you're looking to play the first Sonic game nowadays, you definitely aren't lacking in options. Not counting the 8-bit game of the same name, you can play Sonic 1 via the original Genesis cartridge, on Sega Saturn via Sonic Jam, the Sega Smash Pack on Dreamcast, the Mega Collection and Mega Collection Plus on GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, the DS Classic Collection, that god-awful GBA port, and the many Genesis collections released on so many consoles throughout the years. You also have the Taxman remasters on Android and iOS, and most recently, the Sonic Origins collection, which is how we'll be taking a look at the game today. Hell, there are even some that I didn't even bother to mention, either because they're no longer available to be purchased, like the Wii Virtual Console version of the game, or because I just don't want to sit here for 40 minutes rambling about different ports of Sonic 1 to you. I'm sure you understand. The main reason I'm using Origins as the means to look at this game is simply because it's the most recent port of the game, and therefore it's how I imagine most people nowadays are going to play it. This version does come with some changes too. Anniversary mode removes lives and continues, and changes the aspect ratio from 4:3 to 16:9 to match modern displays. Honestly, this one change makes this version of the game worth playing. Oh, and of course, don't get me wrong, Origins definitely has its problems. It's not exactly the best collection out there, but it's the closest we'll get to the Taxman versions being ported off of phones via official means. This version also lets you play as Tails, Knuckles, and Amy thanks to Origins Plus, which should have been a part of the fucking release game, but whatever. For this, though, I'm just sticking to Sonic. He was the only playable character in the game originally, so with all that said, let's get into the story. One day, Sonic is running through his home of South Island when he notices a strange robot attacking the local wildlife. After destroying the robot, he finds a captive critter inside. This, of course, was the work of the evil Dr. Robotnik. Now, Sonic wastes no time blasting through his home of Green Hill Zone while freeing as many of the Flickies in the process. And yes, the little critters that are inside of the robots are called Flickies. After foiling Robotnik's plans in Green Hill Zone, Sonic tails him to the ruins of Marble Zone, traversing the deadly traps and avoiding lava pits along the way. He then follows him to Springyard Zone, where Sonic is flung around by springs and bumpers like nobody's business. After stopping Robotnik in Springyard Zone, Sonic then chases him to the nearby Labyrinth Zone, where Sonic is faced with his true, mortal enemy: water. Unlike Mario, Sonic can't swim, which makes Labyrinth Zone quite a challenge for him. Top that off with the fact he also can't hold his breath indefinitely, therefore meaning he has to grab air bubbles in order to avoid drowning. Sonic manages to chase Robotnik out of Labyrinth Zone, which leads him to the rather beautiful Starlight Zone, a zone filled with starry skies and fucking bombs. With nowhere else to run, Robotnik retreats to his home base of Scrap Brain Zone. The area is filled with loads of death traps and crushers, so Sonic needs to be careful. But he does prevail. Despite this, Robotnik manages to get the upper hand when he manages to send Sonic into the underwater ruins underneath Scrap Brain. Sonic, of course, does escape and reaches Final Zone, where Robotnik plans to end Sonic once and for all. It's a tough-as-nails fight, but Sonic does manage to win, and even manages to score one more hit on Robotnik as he makes his escape. Sonic returns home knowing that Robotnik, as far as he knows, is gone. A little bit more going on than your average Mario fare of the time, huh? Honestly, I kind of forget that Sonic had an environmental message. It's barely referenced nowadays. Not that the story in this game matters much in the grand scheme of things, it's really there to just supplement the gameplay. Speaking of which, let's actually talk about the gameplay of this video game. For starters, I feel like they nailed Sonic's controls right out of the gate. The D-pad obviously is for movement, and all 4 face buttons on your controller, or 3 if you're playing on an original Genesis, cause Sonic to jump. Sonic has no run button. Instead, he starts off at a jog and then works up to a run. You can also get Sonic to run faster by building up his momentum. Momentum is the name of the game here, unless you're playing a modern version of the game, which gives Sonic the spin dash from Sonic 2, or the drop dash from Sonic Mania. Honestly, it's pretty impressive just how fluent the momentum-based gameplay works here, and on their first attempt at making this. In the original game, there was a cap on Sonic's top speed, but this was removed in the Origins release, as far as I can tell. Throughout the acts of each zone in the game are these monitors. These are effectively Sonic's equivalent to Mario's question mark blocks. They can contain 10 rings, a shield that protects Sonic for a hit, speed shoes that increase Sonic's acceleration and top speed, invincibility monitors that give Sonic temporary invulnerability. This doesn't protect him from falling into pits, being crushed, or drowning, however. Lastly are extra life monitors that have been replaced with these coin monitors in the Origins version. More on that later. Sonic doesn't need power-ups in order to stay alive, however. Throughout every act in the game, you can find these gold rings. You can collect as many of these as you want, however, being hit causes Sonic to drop all of them. So long as Sonic has one ring, though, he will not die from being hit. But if you do get hit with no rings, that's a lost life right there. Rings have further usage outside of just keeping Sonic alive, though. If you make it to the end of each act with 50 rings or more in your possession, then a giant ring will appear. If Sonic can jump into this ring, this takes him to the special stage. Now, special stages are a classic Sonic staple, but I feel half the time they're more of a miss than a hit, and I feel that that's no exception here. In this game, special stages rotate around Sonic while he's curled up in a ball. You have to use your momentum to navigate through the special stage for a chance to nab one of the Chaos Emeralds. These are super powerful gems that, in this game, just give you the best ending. Yeah, you can completely ignore these if you want, if you really don't care about that sort of thing. There are 6 emeralds in total. In this game, there is no 7th one, and therefore you only have to worry about 6 special stages. I honestly don't like the special stages in this game. They reappear a couple more times throughout the series, but I feel like I'm fighting the physics of these stages half the time. In each special stage are these orbs that affect how the special stage moves. The R orbs can swap the direction that the special stage rotates. There are these up and down ones that just increase and decrease the speed of the rotation. These gold orbs are lying sacks of shit. They boot you out of the special stage and don't give you the emerald. There are also these bumpers. Now, these exist in normal acts. You can find them, most prominently in Springyard Zone, but god damn do I hate these things in the special stages. They send you flying, and I feel like they're way too aggressive with how much they fling you. Special stages don't make up the majority of the gameplay, however. The real meat and potatoes are the zones. In this game, you have 6 zones, not including the final boss stage, Final Zone. Each zone contains 3 acts. The first 2 acts are just normal levels with normal gameplay, with Act 3 containing a boss fight at the end with Dr. Robotnik. It's also for the boss fight reason that the giant rings only spawn in Act 1 and 2. They will not spawn in Act 3. Honestly, the 3-act structure makes each zone kinda overstay their welcome, in my opinion, and fortunately future games do cut this down to 2 acts per zone. Green Hill Zone is Sonic's 1-1. It is a nice, bright, colorful zone that exists to help you get your bearings on the controls and understand the fundamentals of the game. The level design in this zone is really, really good. Really don't have much complaints here. Green Hill Zone is just a fun zone to blast through. And then all momentum, all of that excitement that's built up in you from Green Hill Zone is just punched in the fucking face by Marble Zone. If you couldn't tell, I think Marble Zone is the exact opposite of Green Hill. It's slow, methodical platforming that feels like the game really doesn't want you going fast in. Seriously, it kinda turns me off. There are these lava sections where you have to ride this awful slow-moving block to get across. I don't know, I just wish that they stuck to what they had with the previous zone, since it had such a nice balance of platforming and speed. Springyard Zone is so close to capturing what they had with Green Hill, but then you get to these sections of the level where you have to maneuver between these slow-moving blocks, and if you're not careful, they can crush and kill Sonic. It's such a shame, because this zone does have moments of fast-paced gameplay. It's whatever. Also, the boss in this zone can fucking bite me with whatever the hell this shit was. Labyrinth Zone. Yeah, I don't like this zone. It's the water level of the game, and Sonic, by God, does not do well in water. He's so slow when submerged, and on top of all that, off with the fact that Sonic can't swim. Yeah, even though hedgehogs can swim in real life, I guess Yuji Naka just forgot, or just didn't do his research. He had an idiot moment. Like stated earlier, Sonic can't hold his breath indefinitely, so you have to get these air bubbles. Otherwise, Sonic starts to drown, and the game lets you know with this jingle that I can only describe as panic in musical form. I actually used this as my alarm on my phone for a while. I didn't wake up well. Oh well, just do what you need to do in order to get out of Labyrinth quickly, and just move on to the next zone. Starlight Zone. Ah, ladies and gentlemen, they finally did it. Starlight Zone has that perfect balance of speed and platforming bliss that Green Hill had. I always have a blast in this zone. It's so well designed. I actually prefer this zone over Green Hill. It's easily my favorite one in the game. I enjoy the aesthetic more, and the music is so pretty and so calming. Genuinely, again, this is my favorite zone of the game. I even enjoy the boss fight of this zone. The seesaw gimmick is really fun with how you can launch these spiked bombs Robotnik drops back at him to damage him, instead of launching Sonic into him. Scrap Brain Zone is a death trap of a zone. It is filled with these instant death crushers, saw blades, fire spewing out of these pipes, electricity traps, disappearing blocks, disappearing blocks. Someone called Dr. Wily. I think Robotnik may have stolen something of his. After completing Act 2 of this zone, you get the only level transition in the game, which is bizarre. But Scrap Brain Act 3? Let's just call it Labyrinth Zone Act 4. It's Labyrinth Zone. It's fucking Labyrinth Zone again. As if 3 acts the shit wasn't enough. Just take the shortcut and you'll get out of there in no time. Final Zone is just the final confrontation with Robotnik. He's in this giant crusher contraption, and you just need to bop the crusher that he's in. Once you hit him enough times, the whole thing explodes, causing Robotnik to escape, where you can then hit him one more time, if you want. After that, you get the ending cutscene of Sonic returning the Green Hill Zone. If you got all 6 emeralds, and their power causes Green Hills to grow more flowers. Yeah, that's not much of a great reward, but hey, it pisses Robotnik off. Look at him jumping up and down on the end card. Dude looks like a giant egg. So yeah, that's Sonic 1. Not much else to say. But before we move on, I do want to talk about the Origins re-release and some of the changes that were made to that version of the game. Origins swaps out lives in this game with coins in Anniversary Mode. They can be used to retry special stages, and that's all that they're really for in-game. Origins also gives Sonic access to the Spin Dash and Drop Dash, which admittedly break some of the challenge of Sonic 1. If you want to experience the game in its original intended way, though, Origins has you covered. Just select Classic Mode and you'll have finite lives once more. One of the things that does bother me about Origins, though, is that, and this is true across all of the games in the collection, if you select Classic Mode, you're forced back to a 4:3 aspect ratio for some inexplicable reason. It's really stupid. You should be given the option. Origins also adds Tails, Knuckles, and Amy as playable characters, like I said earlier. I'd like to take some time to talk about the music of Sonic 1. Nakamura, he really brought his A-game for this. Green Hill Zone has a certain coziness to it, definitely fitting of the first level. It makes you feel at ease, and it matches the aesthetic of the zone really well. Labyrinth Zone is easily the worst zone in the game, but I would be lying if I didn't admit that the zone's music does get stuck in my head from time to time. I've already gushed about the music for Starlight Zone, so I'll move on. Just go back to what I was talking about Starlight earlier in the video. That would apply here. Honestly, the game's main theme is really good as well. It can be heard at various points throughout the game. It can be heard on the title screen, during the ending sequence. It's a really nice tune. All around, I'd say pretty good stuff. Sonic the Hedgehog can still be a fun time even 33 years later. I certainly enjoyed myself with this revisit. But let's be honest, this game is rife with first attempt energy, if you catch my meaning. There are some shining examples of excellent game design here, but it also has more than a few sluggish moments. It's for those reasons that I consider this the worst of the classic Sonic games. Not that I think this game is bad, I want to make that perfectly clear. I just think that every other classic Sonic game outdoes this one in every way. But with all that said, I definitely would recommend playing it sometime. The game should only take you about an hour or two to beat. With all of that said, we wouldn't have had some of the best games that I've certainly ever played if it wasn't for this one, so kudos to you, Sonic 1. With that said, I have no clue how to do an outro, so until next time, peace.